Hi everyone, I'm Les,
And I'm Ashley.
and you're listening to Anthropotamus, where we explore some of your favorite anthropology topics.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our latest episode of Anthropotamus. We're here with just a few of the authors from No, We Are Here. Check it out. Lovely, lovely cover. Whoever did this illustration did a wonderful job. One of my favorite covers we've had this year. Before we get started, I'm going to have you each introduce yourselves. Tell us about yourselves. Who are you? Who would like to go first? Rose?
Hi everyone, my name is Rose Soza War Soldier. I am Mount Maidu, Kuya, and Lisenyo, and an enrolled member of Saboba Band of Lisenyo Indians. So I'm California Indian, and I grew up in California. I am an assistant professor for the Ethnic Studies Department at Sacramento State University with an emphasis in Native American studies. I'm really happy to be here. I've known Terria for years and years, and I was very excited and happy to hear about the idea of this book, and really just excited and proud to be able to contribute just a small part to the book. But it's lovely to see all of you.
Hi, I'm Terria Smith. I am the editor of No, We're Here, and I'm a tribal member from the Torres Martinez Desert Kuya Indians in Southern California. For the past 9 years, super close to 9 years, have been the editor of News from Native California magazine and the director of the Berkeley Roundhouse, which is the California Indian Publishing Program over at Heyday. Thank you so much for inviting us to be a part of this. And looking forward to a nice conversation.
Jimmy Sinui, everyone. My name is Viola LeBeau. I'm a member of the Pit River Nation and a descendant of the Cahuilla, Maidu, and Cheyenne River Lakota people. I'm a queer poet, artist, writer, and the current land acquisitions coordinator for the Circle Law Group. And I also support with the decolonial media projects. I previously worked with the Segorite Land Trust as their land back coordinator and media team member, and supported with over 8 sites of rematriation for the Segorite Land Trust, utilizing a number of different methods such as cultural easements, MOUs, MOAs, title transfers, land relationship agreements, and more. And I graduated from Mills College with my BA in sociology with an emphasis in Indigenous studies and studio arts. And I was recently just accepted to the Institute of American Indian Arts for their MFA program in studio arts. So really looking forward to that. And yeah, it's been an honor to contribute to this book. I co-wrote the section of the West Berkeley Shellmound article with Michelle Lee. And yeah, just honored to be here with you all today. Thank you.
Well, good luck on was it an MA program you said?
An MFA program.
MFA. Well, good luck with that. I know my
Thank you.
MA program involved a lot of tears.
Hopefully less tears.
Hopefully.
Fingers crossed.
I mean, okay, so this book has several authors. And I can just imagine my times as having to do group projects and how well those went. So tell us about how did this even get started, and how were you all able to collaborate so well enough to put this together? Not, I guess that kind of came out weird, but I mean, how did this all come about?
It worked out a whole lot simpler, thankfully, than than that. The book is actually an anthology and a collection of essays and interviews and things that had been published either in News from Native California magazine previously, or that had been like in chapters or sections of books that were published in the Berkeley Heyday Roundhouse program, in some of the other publications and the other books and things like that. So we collected from there. The book kind of came across, well, for a long time, we had been trying to figure out how to, gosh, for years, people have kind of wanted like a collection of some sort from News from Native California magazine. And, just because it's been around for so long and so many wonderful people have written over the years for the magazine. And we wanted to bring something together under a theme. And we thought a really, really good theme, the good, smart people over at Heyday and myself thought a good theme for the book would be resistance. And there were, of course, a number of pieces over the years that fit under that idea. I'm glad that you mentioned earlier the cover of the book. I'm glad that you think it's beautiful. We agree. The image from that cover for Know We Are Here came from, it was actually a billboard campaign from a couple of years ago that was put together. It's, I believe it was titled Tongvaland. And it was a bunch of different images and billboards that were placed in Los Angeles to give the tribal community of Los Angeles some visibility. And that particular image was taken by a Chemehuevi photographer by the name of Cara Romero. If you have the opportunity to look at her work, it's brilliant, and the juxtaposition and everything of the style that she has between the past and the present, and it's really powerful. And so we were fortunate enough to be able to get permission from her to be able to use that as the cover of Know We Are Here. And the young woman in the picture is a Tongva individual. Her name is Wishoyo Alvitri. She's also an amazing illustrator and artist. And so it was wonderful that there was sort of this fluidity in it. When, you know, the name of the book is Know We're Here. Of course, the title came from a quote from Deborah Miranda, who's also featured as one of the essayists in the book. And it was a photo that came from a project about visibility. And of course, you know We're Here. It's, you know, a statement about visibility. So those are kind of some of the elements that drew together for the project.
It's interesting that one of you is an ethnic studies professor, and that we're doing this interview right now because I'm actually taking my first Native American Studies class at the moment. And I'll say this: I've been learning so much, and how much, you know, of what I've learned is much of what I've learned rather is related to Native American visibility and essentially erasure. And I think the title of your book being not Know We Are Here is pretty apt for that. In what way has this book helped to reach out to those Native Americans in California that don't get the visibility that they should?
Do you want me to answer?
I
All right.
hopefully that was an answerable
Mhm.
question. I apologize if it wasn't.
Right. So it sounds like you're actually asking a couple of different questions. And so one, certainly, I think, like Terria mentions, the idea of visibility. This is something that specifically California Indian people have asserted for generations upon generations. For folks who are unfamiliar with the different histories and experiences of California Indians, both native and non-native, there does seem to sort of a need for, informing folks, educating folks. Because I'm a university professor, I always sort of frame my classes for my students that they don't know what they don't know. But after my class, you know, so what are you going to do? If you're happy sort of with the ways that things are going, then be apathetic, do nothing. But if you have identified a cause for really sort of critical thinking and reflection and thought, and the key point, the key linchpin is action, what are you going to do? And so I think that all of that ties together really with, the very much the histories and the solidarity that has always been part of California Indian experience. And so whether you're talking about different organizations, whether you're talking about the publication itself, this is something that California Indians have always participated in, because our grandparents, our great-great-grandparents, our parents, very much identified that we recognize we're a smaller population. The majority of Native Americans in the state of California are actually not California Indians. So then how do you work on educating? How do you get people to see the sheer diversity of really sort of the different cultures that have always been here, that are from here, but have always been here? And so I think that kind of what you're getting at is sort of the idea of visibility. And I think that that's a key component. And really, I think you could say that over the last 15, 20 years, visibility has had progress. There has been a shift. That's not to say that it's perfect, that there's not space and room for improvement, but I think that there has been some shifting. But I think, you know, greater than visibility and greater than sort of survival, what this book contributes to and sort of the conversations that are within each of the essays and chapters and contributions is certainly, right, we survived. But beyond that point, that California Indian people as a peoples are thriving, as a peoples are, you know, we are beyond the point of survival. And within the historical narrative, there is often only one-dimensional stories about all Native people, and specifically for California Indians, frequently what happened is that we were simply overlooked and ignored. We're beyond that point. So we're asserting our presence, we're asserting our sort of cultures. We are asking both Native people and non-Native people to recognize our diversity, to recognize our sovereignty, to recognize that, yes, we are here, but beyond that point, if you are a resident of California, you need to engage with tribal peoples and tribal nations here in a much more responsible and respectful manner than what has happened up to now. And we are beyond the point of really sort of, I think, politely asking for this. We are saying this is a requirement. And if you do not do this, we are not going to interact with this institution, with this organization, with this municipality. We are beyond that point. And so I see all of these different threads really working together and really being reflective in this one publication. So yes, it's about visibility and it is about education, but it's also all of these other sort of conversations that I think make up it as well.
So if I could follow up with a question, um, what ways would you recommend that somebody from outside of a tribe could help be active in the community or help with activism in Native American communities?
Mm-hmm. Well, I can share a little bit, and I think Viola also can speak to, actually all of us can speak to this, but I think Viola is greatly positioned to do so. But certainly I would say that really sort of one of the first positions to take is to hear us and listen to us and to believe us. It's great for non-Native people to be supporters, but to be very clear, we don't need you to lead. And we also have never asked you to take over our movements. And so for my students, like I tell them, like some students are really great at like graphic design. Some students are really great at sort of, they can very quickly write like, statements issued to the press to sort of think about what is your skill set? What do you think that you're good at? And to really sort of seek out organizations, different sort of groups of peoples, and offer your skill set, and sort of move from there. But really to take a position of, hearing and listening and believing us. We don't need you to tell us what our issues are, and we don't need you to tell us how to pursue it. But we very much do appreciate support. And Viola?
Yeah, thanks, Rose. I just popped something in the chat here, and maybe you can share that with listeners. It's the How to Come Correct Protocols, Guidelines, and Invitations created by the Segura Land Trust. And I supported with putting this document together, and it came out of a place of the Segura Land Trust. I guess I should probably back up a little bit, is an urban Indigenous women-led land trust based in the East Bay, primarily based around Oakland. And it's led by the Confederated Villages of Lishawn Nation, which is one of the Ohlone tribes in the Bay Area. And they're situated in a position in which they get many requests of many different kinds and of many different like forms of nature, in terms of asking for land acknowledgements, asking for like how to be in good relation with Indigenous people today, asking for collaborations and opportunities and volunteering and speaking engagements. And so this document came from a place of navigating those conversations and those requests for labor from Indigenous people, primarily coming from non-Indigenous people. Who were, primarily wanting to come with good intention and wanting to be really genuine about building these relationships, but maybe needing a little bit of guidance in the process of how to do that. And so it outlines a lot of different areas, including like preparation, doing your own research, reading Know We Are Here to get some background information about California Native people and some of the battles that we're currently facing. Um, and I think in doing your own research, you're also taking out a piece of the step of asking for free labor from Indigenous people, by taking that upon yourself. And it also is framed in a way of self-reflection of, okay, why are you asking for this? Why do you want a land acknowledgement? What is it going to be used for? How is it going to uh, acknowledge the people of the land that you're on, and then how is it also going to take it to the next step? How are you going to actively be building these relationships with Indigenous people? So I think it's a great resource. The Segura Land Trust also has a rematriation resource guide, which I think just provides like a good framework for how to be navigating these kinds of conversations, and for folks that are really wanting to go about building relationships in the right way.
I wanted to back up just a little bit for people. How do I say, like, okay, I'll go to the intro that I wrote for the book and everything like that, and it talks a lot about ignoring people. I think the first step that people need to take is to stop ignoring tribal people, especially nowadays when there is a significant amount of visibility for tribal peoples. In the state of California, with more than 100 federally recognized tribes and, probably over 50 non-federally recognized tribes, there is a tribal community within driving distance from anywhere in California. We are a very small portion of the population, but I think something that people overlook is, okay, there are so many resources for people to be able to find out who their local tribal people are, who their local tribal communities are, what they have going on, if there are issues that they need support with, and that sort of thing like that. You can start at home, like literally in your own hometown, and find out who the nearest tribal people are, and figure out if they do need support, and if they don't, how to culturally engage with them. Lots of us have events and things going on, and it's not that hard to engage with tribal people. It's there are people everywhere that you can engage with and everything. But the first step I find with a lot of people in the work that I do with the magazine and just in California Tribe specifically is that you have to stop ignoring tribal people and say, oh, well, I remember when I was a reporter years ago for the Desert Sun newspaper, somebody asked me what my ethnicity was, and I said, I'm Kauai. And they said, what's Kauai? I said, an indigenous tribe that's native from this area. And, oh, yeah, that's right. It's kind of like an afterthought sort of thing like that. If I had just said I was Native American, that wasn't going to work for me. I wasn't going to tell people that. But, but people not necessarily thinking, it's kind of, again, like what I've emphasized in the intro, people think of Indian country being somewhere far away, not, in your hometown and that sort of thing, when in actuality, especially here in California, which, I focus on in my work, it's we're everywhere. And it's not too much of a challenge to engage with us.
Funny you said that you're everywhere. I volunteer. So I am an archaeologist working CRM, and I volunteered for my daughter's school. They had like wanting to have parents to come talk about their careers because basically all the students wanted to be doctors and teachers and police officers, and they wanted to teach the children like the different job opportunities they have. So I went to discuss, and one of the teachers asked, um, a teacher asked, well, is there work here? Like, and I'm just thinking like, and I was like, well, this is California. I mean, prior to settlement, so you had large indigenous populations living all over California because of all the resources and the wonderful weather. I'm like, yeah, of course I work here, but I thought that was a very odd question. Like, what do you mean? Like, of course there's archaeological sites everywhere here because there was tons of people living here before settlers came. But I thought it was interesting. I'm like, but you're a teacher, don't you teach social studies? I don't know. It just made me think about that moment because it just happened a few weeks ago. But at the same time, thinking about my own education in public school, I almost felt like when I was in elementary school was a little bit of a turning point because I felt like it was when they were starting to include Native American history a little bit, and they were starting to teach us, hey, Christopher Columbus was not, didn't discover anything, right? Um, and I remember watching a documentary, and it mentioned, the protests that happened on Alcatraz, and I can't. It might have been one of Michelle's chapters. I don't remember who mentioned it, um, but she had mentioned in her chapter, unless it was one of you, it wasn't one of you, right? But how there is people who were protesting, but whose tribe wasn't even from California, and I thought I mean, it's not something I had ever thought about before because growing up, it was just Native Americans, and we never discussed the diversity within it. And I was like, oh, well, that makes a lot of sense. And I was like, I don't, I might be American and someone's from Texas is American, but I would never call myself Texan, right? So why would we just call all Native Americans and not emphasize the diversity within each community? Um, but with that being said, do you feel that the visibility within the community has changed over the past several years? Whether that be in academia or the private sector. I mean, have you seen over the past several years Native American voices been able to grow and um, been able to what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe to just bring their identities out more in the public or become more visible.
That's tough, specifically for California. I cannot say it's probably at least a couple times a week with my job where I have to explain to people the difference between Indians from California and California Indians. You know, um, it, uh, um, it's really, really, really tough. And I think that there was okay, how do I say this? Okay, I'll just say it. There is I would say the pervasive narrative or the visibility when it comes to tribal people is one that was selected by the colonizing culture. So the cultures that adapted to things um, that were valuable during colonization, the folks that were horsemen, the folks that had warring tribal nations and those sorts of things like that. Those are the folks today that I feel get the visibility. So when you picture a Native American or an American Indian in your head, it looks like those folks a lot of times from the plains. And you don't think of a Yurok person or a Cahuilla person or a Liseño person or a Hotchman person. You don't think of tribal people in California because people are conditioned to believe through education or through imagery, media, those sorts of things, that Native people look a certain way. I remember when News from Native California magazine was celebrating its 30th anniversary, and we hosted the event, an anniversary event at the Autry Museum of the American West. And there was a gentleman who kind of was in the museum, kind of strolled by, and we were singing and having lots of, and where I come from, we sing birds. We're bird singers with gourds and everything like that. This guy I couldn't communicate to him because he kept saying, "Why are you not playing drums? Indians play drums." And I kept saying to him, "We don't do that here. That's not what we do. We play gourd rattles here and everything like that." And I kept trying and trying and trying, and he could not accept the fact that that's not what tribal people in this area did. And so I finally ended up having to tell him, I said, "Okay, maybe you should go talk to one of the singers," which means one of the men. You need to go talk to one of the men about why it is that we do the things that we do here, because he wasn't listening to me. He wasn't hearing me. So although there is visibility, I see, like, in popular mainstream culture, there's shows like, Reservation Dogs, or, the really cool True Detective series, but those weren't focused in California. And in fact, I remember during the first season of Res Dogs, a lot of people saying, because part of the story was, that the young folks were coming to California, said, if they don't mention any California Indians, we're going to be furious. Like, people were really, really watching and making sure that there was some sort of representation of tribal people in California, because it's so to answer the question on visibility, if I think that it's improved and changed, for California people, there are still challenges in our visibility, and not necessarily that people don't know that there's tribal people here, but they don't know what tribal people here look like, what our societies look like. They still imagine our societies as people who play drums and people who ride horses. And my folks here, we have a cowboy culture here down south. I've got friends and stuff that have cattle ranches and those sorts. So that is still there, but the imagery goes more with people from the plains, because what the colonizing culture believed. Oh, these are the folks that we should admire and look at. These are real Indians and everything like that.
I often think about that super old commercial with the Native American on the side of the highway and the trash being thrown, and I'm like, I feel like in some ways we've come a long ways from that super old commercial, but it's there, it's stuck in my head still, and I have to tell myself, like, that is not right.
Yeah, that was Iron Eyes Cody, and he actually wasn't a Native person. He was Italian American, which is another component when we're talking about tribal peoples and cultures. To take a step back, I think also structurally, non-Native people have difficulty understanding that when we're talking about tribal identities and tribal cultures, we're not talking about a race. Native people, we were never, race didn't exist. And so we have been racialized, right? A construct has been placed upon us, but that's never how we had identity formation or sort of learned and knew about ourselves. And so I think one of the additional challenges that Terria mentions is sort of the idea that there's this expectation And this idea that somehow non-Native people are sort of the final arbitrators about like what Native people are supposed to look like and sound like and act like and do. Um, and again, to be very clear, we don't need non-Native people placing their ideas upon us. We are a political identity deeply tied to the land. The land informs our cultures, and it is directly derived from the land. Tribal identity means that I can visit the lands that my people are from, that our creation stories tells us that our God or our gods placed us there. The stories explain how are mountains there? Why is there a river there? Why is there a certain plant that grows in a certain area? You can see it up and down the state, and yet people still place this idea, all of these ideas upon us. Up north in the Northwest, right? It's like they're river people. And so you can see how salmon are intertwined into their cultures. Salmon is often the first solid food that babies eat who are from that area, right? It is that embedded in their culture. And they see salmon not as a resource, but as a relative. You can see this all over the place. For tribal people who are in Southern California, right? White sage, it's a type of salvia. It only grows naturally in Southern California and then the northern part of Baja, Mexico. If you know our stories, right, whether they're Serrano, Ipai, Tipai, Kumeyaay, right, Kuya, our stories tell us how that plant came to be there. It only grows naturally there. It can live outside of that area, but it only grows naturally there. And so we're a land-based tribal people. And I think that that's one of the challenges, that people have an expectation, and you can see it in the old Westerns. You could see it with Iron Eyes Cody, right? These really janky wigs that they would wear. And certainly, right, some tribal people do continue to wear long hair. Some don't, right? Um, some tribal people, do wear cultural markers, right? So you can see it in sort of the regalia and what we choose to wear, but sometimes we don't. But it's always this sense of this expectation of like how I, as a Native person, have to fulfill what your expectation is about what a Native person should be. A lot of Native California Indian authors talk about this. So whether you're talking about Deborah Miranda, whether you're talking about a piece by Vincent Medina, whether you're talking about poets like Emily Clark, right? They're all referencing this idea of this external factor that, to be very clear, tribal people are really one of the only populations that still have to endure this today. Like you would never imagine like someone telling someone who identifies as African American, you're not Black. And let me tell you all the ways that you are not Black. Right? You're not Filipino American. Let me tell you all the ways that you are not Filipino. That simply doesn't happen. But somehow, non-Native people are extremely comfortable trying to tell us what their expectations are and why we are not Native, right? Why we're not California Indian, why I'm not Kuya, why I'm not Mountain Maidu. And to really be really, really clear, I think it's a misunderstanding of like tribalism as a positive, because I think in mainstream society, tribalism is often cloaked as sort of, right, it's a negative. You often hear it in political rhetoric, right? Like, oh, it's a bad thing to be tribal. Um, in Native cultures, that's a positive, to be tribal, right? You understand land, you understand kinship, you understand community, you understand place, you understand humbleness, you understand relationality and positionality. That's how we're raised to be in our culture. And in many ways, that's actually the antithesis of mainstream society. And rather than try to understand it, non-Native people try and tear it down or criticize it and say, well, this is somehow deficient. But what if you're wrong? What if our way of living is actually a much more balanced, healthier place to be? What if you're wrong?
After I started reading the book, actually, while I was still reading the book, me and a friend drove down to the SAAs, which were in Riverside this year, and you see the signs everywhere, farmers wanting more water, more water, more water. And all I keep thinking is like that movie of that 90s movie Tank Girl, when we use so much water, all that's left is sand. And to me, I don't understand how people don't see the impacts they have on nature. And there's just this disconnect of how important the environment you live in is and how it takes care of you as you should take care of the environment. I don't know where I'm going with this. It just made me think of just this disconnect of the environment and the place you live in. Um, and I think it might have been the same chapter with Michelle discussing water. And um, it always surprises me the arguments people have with wanting to um, develop and improve their areas. In reality, they're just taking and taking and not looking ahead and how that impacts the community. I don't know where I was going with this. That was just a random thought I had.
Well, I mean, so that was actually one of the things that I wanted to talk about was the water resource chapter and how farming has impacted fishing, specifically for the Chinook salmon and even driven them towards extinction. Really, what I'm getting at here is since I started fishing, I've been paying a lot more attention to nature and how water has been affected over the last few years. And when I started seeing the tunnel signs and how we were going to export water down to Southern California, and a lot of people tried to frame it as this is for drinking water, and while maybe the tunnels were for drinking water, they use that as the scarcity of water as a reason to deny that specific project, while at the same time we were ignoring the impact of farming, widespread farming on these natural resources. And it was a question that I didn't know I needed to ask until I started going out there and doing things like this. Um, like I said, just a comment on, I guess, your comment on that chapter, but I did actually have another question, and I apologize for running straight into it, but and I want to thank Viola for actually putting that in the chat. But the um, the Native Lands website, I believe you said there was an app in the book somewhere. There's a lot of resources that were mentioned in the book, and the Native Lands app here it's actually uh really interesting to take a look at it and see specifically where certain languages were uh, in use and where certain tribes were. I wanted to know if there's any specific resources out there to help learn some of these languages for people outside of tribes.
There's a really cool organization that Heyday's been partnering with for a really, really long time called the Advocates for Indigenous California Language Survival. And it's headed up, it has an all native board from different tribal nations in California. They are who I always lean on when people have questions about certain languages for certain areas in California. But yeah, they are an absolutely wonderful resource. They have biannual gatherings. Wait, yeah, well, yes. every other year. One year they have the Language is Life, and then the other year they have the Breath is Life gatherings to maintain, restore, and support and strengthen tribal languages here in California. So I always tell everybody to go to ICLES, or the Advocates for Indigenous California Language Survival first. And also, we also with Heyday publish a couple of books that have focuses on learning tribal languages or familiarity with tribal languages. There's a book that was written by Leanne Hinton, who is actually one of the folks that started up, along with L. Frank and some other really cool folks that started the Advocates for Indigenous California Language Survival. There's a book titled Flutes of Fire that goes over tribal languages in California, and also it's like Keeping Your Language Alive. She also authored, and another book called Bringing Our Languages Home that talks about California tribal languages and how to learn languages at home and those sorts of things like that. The other piece that I was going to recommend, oh, please don't leave me, it was another really cool resource. Okay. I'll remember, I'm sure, when it's no longer relevant, but but you've got plenty there to get you started with helping to learn some of the tribal languages and things like that.
Perhaps what, Terria, you're thinking about is the Multi-Museum. Their website does have a lot of key languages. And of course, if you look up the local tribal nations that are near where you're at, increasingly they have their own language departments. And so some do have things available online. A lot of tribes now up and down the state we have employed our own linguists. And they're doing things like they're designing apps, they're designing video games for folks to learn language. Some of that is available for non-native speakers, but a lot of it is also specifically being designed and developed for tribal people to bring our languages back to, to breath. So people often use the word breath. That's why you had Terria say, right, the breath of life, sort of the idea that language didn't disappear, it went dormant. For a variety of reasons, a lot of tribes in California, our languages became moribund, but that doesn't mean that they sort of completely disappeared. It's just maybe that you didn't hear it. And so I would also say that those are also a couple of great resources as well.
And I also might mention that our languages are sacred, and it's important that we hold them, and we hold them with integrity. And for anyone that's interested that is non-native in learning these traditional languages, to do so with respect, and to not be utilizing those languages for like personal gain or commodification or things like that. And there's a lot that can be lost in translation when we don't hold these languages with integrity. And yeah, so that would just be my one recommendation there.
I was
That's
actually, I apologize.
so
I was like,
that's oh, go
you
ahead.
go first. You go first. I
No,
apologize.
I was going to say what Viola's saying is a very real thing. There's a board member of ICLES, and somebody who I have a lot of love and respect. He's actually one of my top 5 favorite people. There's an educator and a master Kumeyaay language speaker by the name of Stanley Rodriguez, who's the executive director of Kumeyaay Community College. And their classes are open to everybody and everything like that. But he has a couple of stories about people doing some quite um, exploitive things. There was a guy who who had taken some classes at some point, and the people, because tribal people, a lot of us have a really good senses of humor. They had named him Kumeyaay Dave, but he was going around, costuming and stuff and exploiting language and cultural knowledge that he had gotten. And there was another woman out of La Jolla who had built a dwelling and was taking people on tours and things like that, so the need for respect that Viola is speaking about, it's a very real thing, because people do some very harmful and exploitive things to tribal people.
Yeah.
And yeah, if someone was interested in kind of getting an idea of what those boundaries are, I might circle back to that how to come correct document. There's a section in there regarding permissions. I think just gives a lot of good insight around what are things that I might need to ask for permission for. Um, and I think, you know, within Indigenous teachings, we're always students, you know, we're always learners. And I think quite often non-Indigenous people, they don't incorporate that kind of ideology when they're learning Indigenous teachings, and they want to be the teacher. They want to hold the role of passing something down, of being the teacher of this thing, when you know, it takes a lifetime to learn a lot of these practices and a lot of these teachings. And even for myself, as someone who's, you know, been a part of this community my entire life and has been in both like a ceremonial kind of community and in like a urban native kind of community and in native academia, I'm a student. You know, so we all just have to kind of take that time of self-reflection and what's our purpose and all of it.
Right.
I just want to take a second to make sure we give credit to Rose because that water chapter was hers. And speaking of language, I just, you know, if Miranda ever hears this, reading her chapter and how she struggled with language, I felt that so hard on that first page when she was discussing how hard it was for her to learn a language and her sister learned it so quickly. I'm like, that is me. All those years of Spanish, and I still can't speak to half the people in my family. But that's just a side note. Um, Les, do you have any more questions? I feel like that resource topic was a really good um place to end.
Uh-huh. Yeah, no, I didn't actually have any more questions there. I was just going to say that I was asking, well, actually I suppose I do have a question. I was asking about languages from a point of wanting to show respect, but also it occurs to me that the question I should probably ask is it appropriate for somebody who has not traveled to actually seek out to learn tribal languages in the first place? And I think you guys answered it very, very well there. Uh, the answer being it depends, I suppose. Um, yeah, no, that was really the only bit that I have there. So if you're ready to wrap this up, unless you guys have anything else you want to share.
I would just follow up really quickly with the idea that certainly with language, it depends, and that's true with everything. Like I always tell folks, like don't like run out and like try and find an Indian. Like don't do that.
No.
Like what we're you know, asking of folks is really to understand the investment and the time to develop these relationships. If you don't have a relationship, right? This is not something that you can sort of go into a tribal community and say, this is what I want, this is what I need, and I need it within 4 weeks. Like, don't do that. That's harmful. That's insulting. That's condescending. Don't do that. But to understand, right, and I think that for I can speak sort of being in the academy, that's one of the challenges that institutions greatly have. To understand that, you know, an institution might have its goals, its desires, its wants. And if you are hoping to sort of consult with tribal peoples to build relationships with tribal nations, that takes years. Not like you're going to go out and be like, okay, this is what we want, do it. Um, so there's that aspect. But I also wanted to push a little bit about this idea that we don't see or hear tribal languages, because actually, if you learn about a number of the names of a number of the counties in the state of California, some of the rivers, some of the towns, those are actually tribal words. And some folks simply are not aware that they're actually in, you know, native languages. They might sort of like Tuolumne County is a great example, right? People are like, where does the word Tuolumne come from? There's just a whole lot of vowels in it, right? And it's from a native language. When you look at a number of different counties and towns and rivers, it actually comes from our language. And so this idea that, again, more than sort of survival, we've always been here. And even the place names that still exist in a colonial system, we're still there. And so you actually do hear native languages. It's just that in many instances, people aren't aware that, you know, they're native languages. The name of Saboba, right? So Saboba is a word that roughly translates, it means people of the hot springs. And so every time you're saying like, I'm a citizen of Saboba Band of Lisenio Indians, we're actually using our language. And if you look at a number of different rancherias and reservations up and down the state, a number of them, the names themselves, they're actually descriptive. They're describing, again, it goes back to the land. It's describing about what is something that is specifically from there. And so you hear our languages all the time. It's just that in many instances, I think that people aren't aware of it, or they know the name of like our casino, but they don't know the name of the reservation and the peoples that are from there and what that name place actually means. But you hear our language all the time.
That's actually something that I was noting when I was reading your book, is just how many of the names of different counties and cities nearby are from native languages. Like, how did I never know this? Why was I never taught this? This is, yeah. So it was kind of astonishing to me that how common it is to hear these words and names.
Yeah, we always notice the names that are Spanish, especially growing up in, a primarily Hispanic community. But the other languages just don't really, it's in your head, it's just English or Spanish. You don't think about all the other people that live here.
Yeah, I just want to make one comment. Michelle Lee and I's article on the West Berkeley Shell Mound in the book kind of ends on a grim note, following the Court of Appeals. But however, the West Berkeley Shell Mound has since been rematriated to the Confederated Villages of Lishawn Nation through the Segorite Land Trust in partnership with the City of Berkeley. And what's really like a monumental act of land return, and I think is really gonna make us like question and have some discourse around what is land return and what are the different ways that it can look like. But yeah, just wanted to share in that moment of joy and celebration that, even though we're still working with non-Indigenous people to, work out these kinks and find good ways to be in relation with one another. There's moments like these that I think give us a lot of hope and direction for what to see in the future and what to expect. So yeah, just wanted to share that.
Any last comments? Okay, then thank you guys again for coming on the show. It was great talking to you. Great book. For those who haven't already read it, know we are here. You can find it on Amazon. Yeah, I mean, follow us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter at Anthropotamus. Find us on Apple Podcasts. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.